Right, I'm going to talk about the project I've been working on for the last 5 years, which is Sauchiehall Street in Glasgow. This presentation, by the way, is supposed to take an hour, but I'm just obviously going to have to batter through it at a fair rate. So I'll skip all the kind of introductory context stuff and then try and move on to what it actually looks like, or is starting to look like now. It's a City Deal project. I don't know if you know about City Deal. I think it's the biggest public realm project in Europe at the moment. There's over £100 million being spent on the city centre, and I'm sort of in charge of about a third of it, the first tranche of work, of which Sauchiehall Street is the pilot project, which is trying to set a precedent for the rest of the, which is called the Avenues projects throughout the city centre of Glasgow. I'm currently working on Sauchiehall Street and then moving on through the rest of the tranche of projects I've got to work on. Do you know Sauchiehall Street? Do you know Glasgow? Yeah, good, okay, fair enough. You know, it's a big, busy street in the centre of. It used to be really, really famous because for its dancing, basically. Still has a lot of pubs on it. As you know, I mean, the interesting thing about Glasgow, obviously, is the rigidity of its grid. It's got a very, very intact urban grid structure, of which Sauchiehall Street is, hopefully. Sauchiehall Street is in the northwest corner of that grid. We did some consultation, obviously. Again, I'm just trying to get to the sort of meat of this, really. In terms of the humanising of this street, the project had multiple facets to it, trying to solve a number of different issues, sort of loosely based around, I suppose you could call it now, what's now called the Healthy Streets Agenda. But we're also trying to do, improving air quality and things like that. But essentially, all of Glasgow city centre is like this. It's 4 traffic lanes. The two on the outside are generally given over to parking activities, usually just on-street parking for cars, some loading, some bus stops. And then you have 2 running lanes, and generally go in one direction because there's a one-way system which sort of carves up the city centre and makes it quite a difficult place or a difficult street system to cross. So we're trying to unpick all these different things simultaneously when we're doing the project. So that's the basic form I was talking about. The 4 traffic lanes. You have 2 running lanes down the middle. That photograph was taken about 10 o'clock in the morning. There's like this one moving car on that street, and that's typical of Glasgow city centre. There's basically very little traffic, but you have a street system which is capable of taking thousands and thousands of cars per day, but it doesn't need that. So the first thing, obviously, that's the first piece of analysis. Basically, is the streets are too big, or the carriageway is too big. Just trying to deal with a lot of the usual stuff about clutter. You know, people just doing stupid things, parking a bike to advertise at a bar that blocks the footway. Trying to create a street as well, which is a little bit more, a little bit softer. The bus stops on the street are the only place you can sit down. There's only about 3 of them. There's no public seats at all in Glasgow city centre outside of the parks. I mean, it's absurd. So people actually eat lunch in that shelter because there's nowhere else to go. And again, there's bars. Sauchiehall Street was famous for its bars. This is where Charlie Nicholas used to drink back in the 80s. I don't know if you know who Charlie Nicholas is, but footballer. And also a lot of live music venues. So it's got a lot of really big nighttime economy going on. Obviously, a lot of attendant eat. You know, once you've got a drink, you need a kebab. Interesting thing about those bins as well. The street was littered with bins, and the Glasgow City Council just simply enforced a rule which said that all the bins had to be stored inside. We just pointed it out to them. This rule, this local bylaw existed, but they didn't enforce it. So the street was littered by these kind of waste bins, which are now all inside the premises. Just through us pointing out, really, when the project started up. Also, a lot of vacant units. The street was suffering. The economy of the street was suffering. A few derelict units as well. But it's a grand old street in the city centre, and the whole of that urban grid I showed before is like this. It's sort of 4 or 5 stories. At the ground floor, you've got all those activities I've just shown you. But above that, you've got basically residential stuff, some offices. But on Sauchiehall Street, it's primarily residential. To get to the concept, I did a lot, because I know the first thing I always try and do when I'm doing designing the street is work out where the trees are going to go. And then everything else can fit around that. Because they're the most sensitive to constraints, such as the underground utilities, I do a lot of mapping of where the utilities are, so I can find out where the streets are, so the trees can go and stop there. So the basic concept really was to plant a line of trees down the middle of the street. On the north side, which is the left-hand side of this picture, we're going to have a bi-directional cycle track, a multifunctional verge in which the trees sat, which also hosted things like the bus shelters and all the street furniture. And then on the far side, a footway, and then a footway on the south side of the street as well. The traffic would run down the middle of the street again. So we went down from 4 lanes to 2 lanes. The idea really was that all the stationary activity, vehicle activity, would take place on the southern side, and then all the bus stops and the taxi bays would be on the north side. So the through traffic had to meander very slowly in a kind of sweet S-curve through these obstacles which were kind of placed on the street. So there's only one running lane of traffic from 2, and that running lane has to meander, so it's going quite slowly and can't really cause too much trouble. So that's basically the visualization we produced to explain that concept. Trees down the middle, cycle track. Interestingly, we originally started off, that central verge was going to be had a SUDS capability with rain gardens. The city council couldn't, or the highways team didn't have a capability of maintaining them, so we had to that had to be dropped. But this shows you how the street basically is laid out. The key thing for me as well in terms of the scale of the city is to try and get these components to be as big and strong as possible. So they're all dead straight, they're all wide, and they're all I think quite strong in their execution, so that they don't get lost in the city in that grid form. So up and down street, one of the key things was a lot of side roads hitting Sauchiehall Street, and they were all creating fragments in that walking environment. So one of the key things I wanted to do was to put in these continuous crossings, which were in the first presentation. I call them Copenhagen crossings, because I first saw them in Copenhagen. And I've done them in Clapham. So there was 2 key components. This one, walking along the street and crossing the side roads, and also being able to get across the street easily at these junctions as well. So this is it now. Or about a week ago. It's nearly finished. It's not quite finished because of the fire at the art school caused delays in the programme. So it will be completed in about, 2 months' time, I guess. But it shows you how it's starting to, the original concept is starting to be delivered. This is the first block. Cyclists are starting to use the cycle lane. Again, the trees were just coming out into leaf. We put them in huge size, 40, 45, 50s, I think. So this is just showing you how that first phase, that first block is turning out. I'll look at something in a little bit more detail in a second. There we go. So that's that big linear component, and then the second component was I was trying to fix all these. Every side road was like this. There was often no drop curbs, no tactile paving, which I don't think is important anyway necessarily. The really fractured pedestrian environment. Just stuff in the way, and there we are. This is in January sometime. These are the first continuous crossings that went in. These are just during construction. There's one, again, sorry, more before shots. That's it. I'll just leave it at that. So that was it. The second component of the concept really was to make sure that there was a very strong pedestrian link from the west end of the street to the east end of the street, which takes you into the city centre, and that you could walk continuously along both sides of the footway without having to give way to traffic. Although, of course, there's a certain amount of negotiation when you come to these places, because vehicles are crossing that, but it still reads very much as a pedestrian space in which the vehicles are moving through rather than the other way around. So that was the, I mean, that's it really. It's quite a simple scheme. It just took a long, long time to design it, get it past the highway authorities through the safety audits and on site. And it's just that, I don't know why these things take so long to build. They've been doing it for 2 years now. The fire got in the way, but you know, we're kind of nearly there. But I don't know, it's painfully slow because you have to keep all the shops open and the street open. And then we did a little bit of work on the side roads. Glasgow has a series of lanes which run parallel to the main streets, and these again were causing fractures in that pedestrian movement environment. So we just sort of built over those in the same way that we did on the main street. And then there's a little bit of the detail of that. Don't know what that's doing there. And this is just a little zoom in on the detail. It's funny that the council it's not what I originally proposed for the cycle lane surface, but that's a different story. What I was very concerned, what I did want to do though, was not have a step between the footway, the cycle track, the verge, because I felt that was going to create some sort of severance if you're in a wheelchair or if you're pushing a buggy, and a potential trip hazard as well. So we put in this sort of profiled cycle delineator curb, which is in the tactile paving guidance, but the local blind and partially sighted lobby are still not sure if they like it or not. They can find it if they're walking up and down with a stick, but not so easy to find it if you're walking into it. But it's there now, so we'll have to wait and see what happens. I think it's finished. There it is, that's it, finished. Thank you.